The boarding line moved at a snail's pace. Tom Reeves checked his ticket again, though he'd memorized his seat assignment hours ago. 20D. Window seat. His palms were already damp. Sir, your boarding pass? The gate attendant's voice snapped him back to reality. Tom handed over his phone with the digital ticket displayed. His hand trembled slightly, but the attendant pretended not to notice. People afraid of flying weren't exactly rare. Thank you, Mr. Reeves. Have a good flight. Tom nodded and stepped onto the jet bridge. Each step toward the plane felt heavier than the last. The irony wasn't lost on him. A 34-year-old aeronautical engineer who designed parts for military aircraft, but couldn't board a commercial flight without his heart trying to hammer its way out of his chest. It's just physics, he whispered to himself. Just physics and mathematics and thoroughly tested systems. The flight attendant at the door greeted him with a practiced smile. Tom tried to return it, but managed only a tight grimace. He shuffled down the aisle, counting rows. 17, 18, 19, 20. He stopped at his row and stared at 20D like it was an execution chair. A young woman in the aisle seat stood to let him pass. Tom mumbled his thanks and awkwardly made his way to the window. He stowed his backpack under the seat in front of him and immediately buckled his seatbelt, tugging it as tight as he could without cutting off circulation. His sister Jenny would laugh if she could see him now. You'll design planes but won't fly in them? She'd teased when he'd initially suggested driving to her wedding in Colorado. But a 3-day drive each way wasn't practical with his limited vacation time. So here he was, about to spend 2 hours in his personal version of hell. First time flying? Tom turned to find a boy, maybe 10 or 11, watching him from the middle seat. The kid had unruly brown hair and curious eyes behind thick-framed glasses that seemed too big for his face. No, Tom said. But it doesn't get easier. My mom says it's safer than driving, the boy said, nodding toward the woman in the aisle seat who was absorbed in a book. Your mom's right, Tom said. Statistically speaking, air travel is approximately 200 times safer than driving. The boy's eyes widened. Really? Really? I can give you the exact numbers if you want. Numbers were safe. Numbers made sense when nothing else did. I'm Robbie, the boy said. Tom, are you a math teacher? Tom smiled, his anxiety momentarily forgotten. Engineer. I design parts for planes, actually. No way. Robbie's face lit up. Like this one? Military planes mostly. Fighter jets. The flight attendants began their safety demonstration, and Tom's anxiety came rushing back. He gripped the armrests and focused on his breathing. In for 4 counts, hold for 7, out for 8. A technique his therapist had taught him years ago, Robbie noticed. If you build planes, why are you scared to fly in them? The question was so direct, so innocent, that Tom couldn't help but answer honestly. Knowledge and fear don't always talk to each other, he said. I know exactly how safe this plane is, but my body doesn't believe my brain. Robbie considered this. Like how I know there's no monster under my bed, but I still jump into it really fast sometimes? Tom laughed, surprised. Yeah, actually, exactly like that. The plane began to taxi and Tom's laughter died. He closed his eyes as the engines revved, focusing on the physics. Thrust, lift, drag, weight. The 4 forces that kept these metal tubes in the sky. He could recite the equations in his sleep. The takeoff was smooth, but Tom didn't relax until they reached cruising altitude. The seatbelt sign dinged off, and he finally loosened his grip on the armrests, flexing his stiff fingers. Want to see my game? Robbie asked, pulling out a handheld gaming device. Tom welcomed the distraction, and for about 40 minutes he almost forgot they were 35,000 feet in the air. Robbie's mom occasionally glanced over with grateful looks as Tom helped her son navigate particularly tricky game levels. Then the plane dropped. Not much, maybe 100 feet, but enough that drinks spilled and unsecured items flew into the air. The seatbelt sign dinged immediately. Ladies and gentlemen, the captain has turned on the fasten seatbelt sign. Please return to your seats. And secure your seatbelts, a flight attendant announced, her voice steady but tense. Another drop, harder this time. Screams erupted around the cabin. Robbie grabbed Tom's arm, his game forgotten. Tom's heart raced, but the engineer in him recognized standard turbulence. "It's okay," he told Robbie, though his own voice shook. "Just air pockets, like bumps on a road." The plane shuddered, and a woman across the aisle began to cry. Robbie's mother reached for her son's hand, her face pale. "What's happening?" Robbie asked, his voice small. Before Tom could answer, the plane lurched sideways. More screams. A baby wailed somewhere behind them. The overhead bins creaked ominously. The captain's voice came over the intercom. "Folks, we've hit some unexpected turbulence. It's nothing to worry about, but I need everyone seated with seat belts fastened. Flight attendants, please be seated." Tom saw the panic spreading around him like a virus. The crying woman was now hyperventilating. A man in a business suit had his eyes squeezed shut, murmuring what sounded like prayers. Robbie trembled beside him. Something shifted in Tom. His own fear didn't matter right now. "Hey," he said to Robbie, keeping his voice level. "Want to know something cool about this plane?" The boy looked up, tears glistening in his eyes. He nodded. "This is a Boeing 737-800. Its wings can flex up to 17 degrees. Tom held up his hands to demonstrate. "Right now, they might be bending a bit, and that's good. They're designed to do that." The plane dropped again. A few more screams, but Robbie was watching Tom's hands. "The wings are like springs," Tom continued, louder now so others could hear. "They absorb the energy from these air bumps. Every plane is tested for way worse conditions than this." The woman across the aisle had stopped crying and was listening. Tom made eye contact with her and smiled reassuringly. "Ever shake a tree branch?" he asked, addressing both Robbie and now the wider audience of frightened passengers within earshot. "It bends but doesn't break, right? These wings are designed the same way, just with a lot more math involved." Another bout of turbulence hit, but fewer people screamed this time. "The pilots can see these air pockets on their radar," Tom said. "They're trying to find smoother air. It's completely routine." Robbie's mother leaned forward. "Are you really an engineer?" Tom nodded. "Aerospace. I design control surfaces for F-22 fighters." "He knows everything about planes," Robbie added, his fear noticeably reduced. The business suit guy had opened his eyes and was listening too. "So this is normal?" he asked. "Completely," Tom assured him. "Commercial aircraft are designed to handle turbulence much worse than this. The pilots train for it constantly in simulators." As if on cue, the plane began to steady. The violent jerking softened to gentle rocking. "See?" Tom said. "They found smoother air, just like I said." A flight attendant made her way down the aisle, checking on passengers. She paused at their row, her eyes moving from the calm cluster around Tom to the still panicked passengers further back. "Everything okay here?" she asked. "We're good," Robbie's mom said. "Thanks to our resident plane expert," the attendant raised an eyebrow at Tom. "He designs fighter jets," Robbie explained proudly. "He told us about how the wings work." "Well, thank you," the attendant said to Tom. "Mind if I borrow you for a minute?" Before Tom could answer, she continued, "We have some passengers who could use some reassurance. Would you mind?" Tom hesitated. Public speaking was another one of his fears. But looking at the grateful faces around him, something had changed. For the first time in a flight, he wasn't the most scared person on the plane. "Sure," he said, unbuckling his seatbelt. As he followed the flight attendant down the aisle, Tom realized something strange. His own fear had receded. Not completely, it never would, but enough that he felt steady on his feet. For the next 20 minutes, Tom moved through the cabin, explaining turbulence in simple terms to frightened passengers. He talked about weather patterns and air currents, wing design, and redundant safety systems. He showed a little girl how to make a paper airplane that demonstrated stability principles. By the time he returned to seat 20D, the worst of the turbulence had passed. Robbie greeted him like a returning hero. "That was awesome," the boy said. "You made everyone feel better." "Not everyone," Tom said, glancing at a few passengers who still looked shaken. "More than before," Robbie's mom said. That counts for something. The captain announced they'd be landing in 30 minutes. Normally, this would be when Tom's anxiety peaked again. But he felt different now. Not fearless, but purposeful. "Will you be scared during landing?" Robbie asked. Tom considered the question. "Probably," he admitted. "But that's okay. Sometimes being brave isn't about not being scared, it's about being scared and doing the thing anyway." Robbie nodded solemnly, like he was filing away this wisdom for future reference. As the plane began its descent, Tom still gripped the armrests. His heart still beat faster than normal. But now he had Robbie's curious eyes on him, and scattered throughout the cabin, the grateful glances of passengers he'd helped. For the first time, Tom realized his fear had given him something valuable: the ability to truly understand and connect with others in their moment of panic. His knowledge made him useful, but his fear made him relatable. Tom's brief moment of post-landing calm vanished when the plane didn't slow down as expected. Instead of taxiing to the gate, the aircraft maintained an unusual speed along the runway. "Ladies and gentlemen," the captain's voice crackled over the intercom, sounding deliberately measured. "We've had a warning light come on in the cockpit related to our hydraulic system. As a precaution, we're going to stop here and have our maintenance team check things out before we head to the gate." Murmurs rippled through the cabin. Robbie looked up at Tom with wide eyes. "Is that bad?" "No," Tom said, trying to sound more confident than he felt. "It's just being careful. Planes have backup systems for their backup systems." "Then why do you look worried?" Robbie asked. Tom forced a smile. "Just disappointed. My connecting flight's in an hour." That was partly true. He was supposed to catch a smaller plane to his sister's town after landing in Denver, but something in the captain's tone had triggered Tom's engineer instincts. Hydraulic issues weren't uncommon, but they weren't always simple fixes either. The plane finally came to a complete stop far from any terminal. Through his window, Tom saw emergency vehicles approaching. Standard procedure, he reminded himself. The captain came back on. "Folks, I've just been informed that our maintenance team needs more time than expected to address this issue. We're going to deplane using air stairs and shuttle you to the terminal. Please remain seated until crew members give you further instructions." A collective groan rose from the passengers. Delayed flights meant missed connections, disrupted plans, and hours of waiting. 20 minutes later, they were filing down a portable staircase onto the tarmac where airport buses waited. The chilly air hit Tom like a slap, much colder than Denver should be this time of year. "Mom, look." Robbie pointed to a distant part of the airfield where sleek gray fighter jets sat in a row. "Those are military planes." "Where are we?" Tom asked a flight attendant standing near the bus. "Eielson Air Force Base, Alaska," she replied. "It was the closest suitable landing site when our warning light came on." "Alaska?" Tom felt dizzy. They were supposed to be in Colorado. They had been diverted over 1,000 miles off course without any announcement. Once on the bus, Robbie's mother turned to Tom. "Did she say Alaska?" Tom nodded, his mind racing through calculations. "We must have had the issue shortly after takeoff. The pilot probably didn't want to cause panic, but Alaska?" She looked stunned. "How long will we be here?" "I don't know," Tom admitted. The bus took them to what appeared to be a rarely used civilian terminal attached to the military base. Inside, airline staff had set up a makeshift customer service area. The scene was chaotic, frustrated passengers forming long lines, harried airline employees trying to provide updates, military personnel observing from a distance. "Attention passengers of Flight 372, a man in an airline uniform announced through a megaphone. "We're arranging alternative transportation to Denver, but it will take approximately 12 hours for a replacement aircraft to arrive. We apologize for this inconvenience. The Air Force has generously allowed us to use this facility. We'll provide meal vouchers and basic accommodation in a designated waiting area." More groans and complaints. Tom checked his phone. No service. He'd have to use the airport Wi-Fi to let his sister know he wouldn't make it to the rehearsal dinner tonight. "Will we get to see the fighter jets up close?" Robbie asked his mother. She smiled tiredly. "I don't think so, honey. This is a military base. We have to stay where they tell us." Tom spent the next hour helping Robbie's mom, whose name he learned was Lisa, navigate the customer service chaos. He managed to get them both confirmed on the replacement flight and found a quiet corner in the designated passenger holding area where they could wait. You don't have to stick with us, Lisa said, as Robbie dozed against her shoulder. I don't mind, Tom replied. Better than sitting alone with my thoughts, afraid of flying and stranded at an airport. This must be your nightmare, Tom laughed softly. Pretty much. As afternoon stretched into evening, Tom grew restless. The holding area was essentially a large, bland room with uncomfortable chairs and limited food options from vending machines. The promised meal vouchers turned out to be good only for packaged sandwiches and chips. I'm going to stretch my legs, Tom told Lisa, who was reading a paperback she'd bought from a small newsstand. Don't get arrested by the Air Force, she joked. Tom wandered toward a wall of windows that looked out onto the military side of the airfield. In the distance, he could see several F-22 Raptors, the very planes he designed components for. Despite his weariness, he felt a flutter of professional curiosity. His company had recently modified a control surface component that was being installed in the newer F-22 models. He wondered if these planes had the upgrade. Through the windows, he noticed a maintenance crew working on one of the jets. They had panels open and seemed to be focused on an area near where his component would be installed. Tom's engineering brain kicked into high gear as he watched their movements. Something didn't look right. The technicians were following a procedure that made sense for the old component configuration, but not for the modified version. If these were upgraded jets, that maintenance approach could actually damage the new interface housing. Tom looked around, spotting a door with a sign reading "Authorized Personnel Only." Nearby, a young airman stood guard, looking bored. Excuse me, Tom approached him. Who would I talk to about a potential maintenance issue with those F-22s? The airman looked at him like he'd grown a second head. Sir, you need to return to the civilian waiting area. I know, Tom said quickly. But I'm an engineer with Aerodyne Systems. We make control surface components for those aircraft. I think I'm seeing a maintenance procedure that could cause problems with the newer models. The airman's expression didn't change. Sir, please return to the waiting area. This is a restricted zone. Can you at least tell your supervisor? The technicians are applying pressure to the VL-17 housing at an angle that could damage the interface if it's the modified version. Sir, the airman's voice hardened. Final warning. Return to the waiting area now. Tom backed off, frustrated but understanding. From the airman's perspective, he was just another annoying civilian trying to get close to the cool military jets. Back in the waiting area, Tom couldn't stop thinking about what he'd seen. If those were upgraded jets, that maintenance procedure could lead to stress fractures in the housing. Not immediately dangerous, but potentially problematic down the line. He spotted an older man in an Air Force uniform getting coffee from a machine set up for the stranded passengers. Taking a deep breath, Tom approached him. Excuse me, sir. I hate to bother you, but I noticed something concerning about the maintenance being performed on the F-22s out there. The officer, a colonel, Tom now noticed from his insignia, gave him a measured look. And you're concerned because I'm an aerospace engineer with Aerodyne. We designed the modified VL-17 control surface interface for the F-22 upgrade program. The maintenance procedure I observed isn't compatible with the new configuration. The colonel's expression remained neutral. And you can tell this from looking through a window several hundred yards away? Put that way, it did sound absurd. Tom felt his face grow hot. I know how it sounds, Tom admitted, but I've spent years working on that specific component. The angle they're applying pressure from would stress the composite housing in a way it's not designed to handle. The colonel studied Tom's face. What did you say your name was? Tom Reeves. Something flickered in the colonel's eyes. Wait here. The colonel walked away, speaking quietly into a radio. Tom stood awkwardly, aware of curious glances from nearby passengers. 5 minutes later, a door opened and a woman in a flight suit walked in. She wasn't tall, but she carried herself with unmistakable authority. Her brown hair was pulled back in a tight bun, and her eyes were sharp as they scanned the room and landed on Tom. The colonel pointed him out, and she strode directly toward him. Mr. Reeves, she said without introduction. I'm Lieutenant Colonel Diane Chen, Squadron Commander. I understand you have concerns about our maintenance procedures? Tom swallowed hard. Yes, ma'am. And you work for Aerodyne Systems? Yes, I led the design team for the VL-17 modification. She studied him, then nodded once. Come with me. Tom glanced back at Lisa, who was watching with raised eyebrows. He gave her a small shrug before following Colonel Chen through a door marked Military personnel only. Am I in trouble? He asked as they walked down a stark hallway. That depends, Chen replied without slowing. If you're wasting my time, yes. If you're right, no. She led him to a small conference room where two men in maintenance uniforms waited. One with graying hair and a weathered face stood as they entered. Chief Master Sergeant Rivera, Chen introduced him. Our head of maintenance. And Technical Sergeant Patel. I want you to explain exactly what you saw and what concerns you. Tom took a deep breath. This was his element. Technical specifications and engineering problems. His nervousness about the unusual situation faded as he launched into an explanation. The officer's mess was nothing like Tom had imagined. Instead of the sterile, formal dining hall he expected, it was a comfortable space with mismatched furniture and walls covered in squadron photos and memorabilia. A few officers in flight suits looked up when he entered with Colonel Chen, curiosity evident in their expressions. Grab whatever looks good, Chen told him, gesturing toward a buffet line. It's not gourmet, but it beats airline food. Tom filled a plate with meatloaf, mashed potatoes, and green beans that looked surprisingly fresh. Chen led him to a table where two pilots were already seated. This is Tom Reeves, she introduced him. He's the engineer who designed the VL-17 component we've been having issues with. Tom, these are two of my pilots, Captain Lee and Lieutenant Rodriguez. Tom shook their hands, noting the mixture of curiosity and skepticism in their eyes. So you're the guy who spotted a maintenance issue from the passenger terminal? Lee asked, raising an eyebrow. Tom felt his face grow warm. It sounds weird when you put it that way. It is weird, Rodriguez said, but if you're right, it's also impressive. Chen's radio crackled. She stepped away to answer it, leaving Tom with the pilots. So you work for Aerodyne? Lee asked between bites. You guys make good stuff. My last squadron had issues with control surface flutter until we got your upgrades. Tom relaxed slightly. This was familiar territory. That was probably the AS-240 package. We redesigned the entire actuation system for that one. Whatever it was, it made my job easier, Lee said. Though I have to ask, if you're so into planes, why were you on a commercial flight? Don't you guys have private jets or something? Tom laughed. I wish. But even if we did, I'd probably find an excuse not to fly. Both pilots stared at him. Wait, Rodriguez said slowly. You design airplane parts, but you don't like flying? Tom shrugged, uncomfortable with the attention. Fear isn't always rational. A smile spread across Lee's face. That's like a chef being afraid of food. Or a swimsuit designer afraid of water, Rodriguez added. I've heard them all before, Tom said, though he found himself smiling too. Chen returned, her expression serious. Chief Rivera checked the maintenance tablets. 3 out of 5 were running the outdated procedure. The table fell silent, so he was right? Lee asked, nodding toward Tom. Apparently, Chen said. They're updating all systems now and rechecking the aircraft that were serviced with the old procedure. She turned to Tom. How concerned should we be about planes that have already been maintained using the incorrect method? Tom considered carefully. It depends on how many cycles they've gone through. The stress damage is cumulative. Do you have the maintenance logs? Chen looked at her watch. The chief is bringing them to conference room 3 in 15 minutes. Can you take a look? Tom glanced at his own watch, thinking about Lisa and Robbie waiting in the terminal, about his sister's wedding, about all the things he should be doing instead of getting involved in military aircraft maintenance. Then again, his flight wasn't leaving for hours, and if there was a serious issue with the F-22s, of course, he said. 30 minutes later, Tom was surrounded by maintenance logs and technical diagrams in a small conference room. Chief Rivera and Technical Sergeant Patel stood nearby, watching as he flipped through the documents. These 3 aircraft have had the most maintenance cycles using the incorrect procedure, Tom said, pointing to tail numbers on a spreadsheet. They're the most at risk for microfracturing. Rivera nodded grimly. Those are our most active jets. They're scheduled for a training exercise tomorrow. Tom rubbed his eyes, trying to focus despite his growing exhaustion. What had started as a simple observation had turned into something much more serious. You need to inspect the housings for stress indicators, he said. There's a specific pattern to look for. Hairline cracks that form perpendicular to the pressure point. That would require removing the entire assembly, Patel pointed out. Each inspection would take at least 6 hours. 6 hours per plane times 3 planes, Rivera calculated. We'd have to cancel tomorrow's exercise. The door opened and Colonel Chen walked in, followed by an older man with silver hair and a stern expression. The insignia on his uniform indicated he was a full colonel. "Mr. Reeves," Chen said. "This is Colonel Blackwood, base commander." Tom stood and shook the man's hand, suddenly very aware that he was in jeans and a rumpled button-down shirt that had been packed in his carry-on. "Colonel Chen tells me you've identified a potentially serious issue with our aircraft," Blackwood said, his voice surprisingly soft for such an imposing figure. "Yes, sir," Tom replied, "though I should emphasize that it's not an immediate flight safety concern. It's a long-term structural integrity issue." Blackwood nodded thoughtfully. "Long-term problems have a way of becoming short-term emergencies when ignored." He turned to Chen. "What do you recommend?" Chen looked at Tom. "Mr. Reeves?" Tom felt the weight of all eyes on him. These people trusted his judgment about million-dollar aircraft and, more importantly, pilot safety. The responsibility was enormous. "Inspect the 3 aircraft with the highest maintenance cycles," he said decisively. "If you find evidence of stress fracturing, ground them until replacement housings can be installed. The other jets can fly but should be scheduled for inspection at the earliest opportunity." Blackwood considered this, then nodded. "Make it happen, Chief." "Sir?" Rivera hesitated. "The inspection will require canceling tomorrow's exercise." "Better to cancel an exercise than lose an aircraft," Blackwood replied. He turned back to Tom. "We appreciate your expertise, Mr. Reeves. How long will you be with us?" "My replacement flight leaves in..." Tom checked his watch. "About 10 hours. "Then we'd better make good use of your time," Blackwood said. "Colonel Chen, please ensure Mr. Reeves has whatever he needs to assist with these inspections." After the base commander left, Chen looked at Tom. "I can have someone check on your friends in the terminal. Let them know where you are." Tom nodded gratefully. "Thanks. Her name is Lisa. She has her son Robbie with her." As Chen made arrangements, Tom found himself being led to a maintenance hangar, where one of the F-22s was already being prepared for inspection. The massive doors were open to the Alaskan evening, where the sun hung low but hadn't set, casting everything in a golden glow. The jet was even more impressive up close, sleek and predatory, designed for dominance of the skies. Tom had seen plenty of technical drawings and models, but standing next to the actual aircraft gave him a new appreciation for his work. "First time seeing one in person?" Patel asked, noticing Tom's expression. "Yeah," Tom admitted. "We don't get many opportunities to see the final product in action." "Well, now you get a backstage pass," Patel said, handing Tom a set of coveralls. "Hope you don't mind getting your hands dirty." For the next several hours, Tom worked alongside the maintenance crew, showing them exactly what to look for. The work was detailed and demanding, requiring careful inspection of components that were never designed to be easily accessible. "There," Tom said around midnight, pointing to a barely visible line in the composite housing of the first aircraft. "That's the beginning of a stress fracture." Rivera leaned in with a magnifying glass. "I would have missed that completely." "It's subtle," Tom acknowledged, "but over time it would grow until the housing failed." They found similar fractures on the second aircraft, and by the time they finished with the third jet, which showed the most severe damage, it was nearly 2 a.m. Tom's body ached from hours of awkward positions and careful work. His eyes burned from fatigue, but he felt a deep satisfaction that overrode his exhaustion. "We owe you one, Reeves," Rivera said as they walked back toward the main building. "Those birds would have been flying with ticking time bombs if you hadn't spoken up." Tom shrugged modestly. "Just doing my job." "Your job was to sit in a passenger terminal and wait for a flight," Rivera pointed out. This was above and beyond. In a small break room, they found Chen talking with several pilots who had apparently been waiting for news. "Well?" one of them asked when they entered. "Reeves was right," Rivera announced. All 3 aircraft showed stress fractures exactly where he predicted. A murmur ran through the group. Tom felt oddly disconnected from the moment, too tired to fully process what was happening. "How long to repair?" Chen asked. "We'll need replacement housings," Rivera said. 2 weeks minimum." Chen nodded, then turned to Tom. "You just saved us from a potential in-flight failure. That's not something we take lightly." One of the pilots, a woman with short blonde hair, stepped forward. "I was scheduled to fly Raptor 87 tomorrow. That's one of the damaged aircraft, right?" Rivera nodded. She extended her hand to Tom. Thank you. It was a simple gesture, but something about the sincerity in her eyes made Tom's throat tight. This wasn't about components or maintenance procedures anymore. This was about people's lives. You're welcome, he managed. Chen checked her watch. Your flight leaves in 6 hours. There's a cot in my office if you want to grab some sleep. Tom woke with a start, momentarily confused by the unfamiliar surroundings. Colonel Chen's office came into focus. The metal desk, the neat stacks of paperwork, framed photos of aircraft on the walls. He checked his watch. 6:17 a.m. He'd slept less than 4 hours. A knock at the door preceded Chen's entrance. She carried 2 steaming cups of coffee. Thought you might need this, she said, handing him one. Your replacement flight is scheduled to depart at 8:30. Airline says they'll start boarding at 7:45. Tom sat up, gratefully accepting the coffee. Thanks for everything. And for the cot. Least we could do. Chen leaned against her desk. I talked with your headquarters this morning. They're sending replacement housings on a priority transport. You called my company? The base commander did. He spoke directly with your CEO. Tom nearly choked on his coffee. Graham Phillips? The CEO? Chen smiled slightly. Is that surprising? Let's just say Mr. Phillips doesn't usually take calls about component issues. He's more of a big-picture guy. Well, the safety of a squadron of F-22s is pretty big picture. Chen checked her watch. The maintenance crew wanted to say goodbye before you left. They're in the hangar whenever you're ready. After washing up in a nearby restroom, Tom followed a young airman to the maintenance hangar. His mind was still processing everything. The CEO involvement, the fact that the base commander had made personal calls. It seemed like an overreaction to a maintenance issue, even an important one. The hangar was busy with activity despite the early hour. Chief Rivera spotted him and waved him over to where several technicians were gathered around a workbench. Morning, Reeves. Rivera greeted him. Got something to show you before you go. On the workbench was one of the VL-17 housings they had removed the night before. Under bright lights and magnification, the stress fractures were clearly visible, a spiderweb of tiny cracks spreading from the pressure point. We did a full stress test on this unit after you left, Rivera explained. It failed at 43% of its rated capacity. Tom frowned. That's much worse than I expected. Exactly, Rivera said grimly. We're talking catastrophic failure during any high-stress maneuver. Your CEO is sending an engineering team with the replacement parts to figure out why the damage progressed so rapidly. The implications hit Tom like a physical blow. If the housing had failed during flight, I'm glad I said something, he said quietly. So are we. Rivera handed him a small package wrapped in tissue paper. The squad wanted you to have this. Tom unwrapped it to find a squadron patch, the kind pilots wore on their flight suits. It featured a snarling wolf's head with the words 336th Fighter Squadron and their motto, We Own the Sky. It's not official or anything, Rivera said, looking slightly embarrassed. But the pilots wanted you to know you're an honorary member now. Tom ran his fingers over the embroidered patch, unexpectedly moved by the gesture. I don't know what to say. You don't need to say anything, Rivera replied. Just know that what you did yesterday mattered. After saying goodbye to the maintenance crew, Tom was escorted back to the civilian terminal. He found Lisa and Robbie in the waiting area, Robbie fast asleep across 2 chairs while Lisa read her book. Tom. Lisa looked up with relief. Where have you been? They told me you were helping with something on the military side, but that was hours ago. Sorry, Tom said, dropping into a chair beside her. It turned into a bigger project than expected. How are you guys holding up? We managed. They gave us cots for the night. She studied his face. You look different. I'm exhausted, Tom admitted. No, it's not that. She tilted her head. You seem, I don't know, calmer? Before Tom could respond, the airline representative announced that boarding would begin in 20 minutes. Passengers who had been sprawled across chairs and on the floor began gathering their belongings. Tom checked his phone, which now had service. 3 missed calls from his sister and a dozen texts ranging from concerned to angry. He'd completely missed the rehearsal dinner and hadn't even let her know. As he was typing an apologetic message, a commotion near the terminal entrance caught his attention. Colonel Chen was walking in, accompanied by a pilot in a full flight suit. They scanned the waiting area until Chen spotted Tom and headed his way. "Mr. Reeves," Chen said formally, "this is Captain Wilson. She's the pilot who would have been flying Raptor 087 today." The blonde pilot from last night extended her hand. Up close, Tom could see the intensity in her blue eyes. "I wanted to thank you personally," she said. "That was my bird you grounded yesterday." "I'm glad I could help," Tom replied, shaking her hand. "We've been trying to figure out what was causing the control issues for weeks," Wilson continued. "Most of us just thought it was normal wear and tear." Lisa was watching this exchange with undisguised curiosity. Robbie had woken up and was staring wide-eyed at the pilot's flight suit. "Are you a real fighter pilot?" he asked Wilson. She grinned at him. "Sure am. Do you fly the planes out there?" Robbie pointed toward the window where the distant shapes of F-22s could be seen. "That's my office," Wilson confirmed, then looked back at Tom. "Or it was until your friend here found out it might fall apart." Tom felt his face flush. It wasn't that dramatic. "It would have been if that housing had failed during a high-G maneuver," Wilson said seriously. The airline representative announced pre-boarding, interrupting their conversation. "That's us," Lisa said, gathering their things. "Robbie, say goodbye to the nice pilot." "Wait," Chen said. "Before you go, there's something else." She handed Tom an envelope. "The base commander asked me to give you this." Tom opened it to find an official letter on Air Force stationery. It was a formal commendation for his assistance, signed by Colonel Blackwood himself. "We don't normally do this for civilians," Chen explained, "but given the circumstances..." Tom was at a loss for words. Again. Captain Wilson checked her watch. "I have to get back. Pre-flight in 20. She gave Tom a respectful nod. "If you're ever in the area again, the officers' club drinks are on me." With that, she turned and left. "You should board," Chen told him. "And Mr. Reeves, if you're ever interested in consulting work, the Air Force could use someone with your attention to detail." As they walked to the boarding area, Lisa looked at Tom with newfound respect. "So that's why you disappeared. You were saving fighter jets." "Just fixing a maintenance issue," Tom said modestly, "and becoming best friends with the Air Force," she added with a smirk. Not bad for a guy afraid of flying. Boarding proceeded smoothly. Tom found himself in seat 20D again, with Lisa and Robbie in their original seats beside him. As he buckled his seatbelt, Tom realized he wasn't gripping the armrests with white knuckles as he usually did. "Aren't you scared?" Robbie asked, noticing the change. Tom considered the question. "A little," he admitted, "but I've got other things on my mind." As the plane began taxiing, Tom's phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Squadron patch looks good on you. Safe travels." Tom smiled and tucked the phone away. The plane accelerated down the runway, and Tom felt the familiar flutter of anxiety in his stomach. But alongside it was something new, a sense of purpose and connection that hadn't been there before. The plane lifted off, and Tom looked out the window at the Air Force base receding below them. Somewhere down there, maintenance crews were installing new parts on fighter jets because of him. Pilots would fly more safely because he had spoken up. The plane hit a small pocket of turbulence, and Tom instinctively reached for the armrest. But instead of gripping it in terror, he just rested his hand there, feeling the vibration of the aircraft. "Are you okay?" Lisa asked, noticing his expression. "Yeah," Tom said, surprising himself with how much he meant it. "I actually am." The plane leveled off at cruising altitude, and the seatbelt sign dinged off. Robbie immediately pulled out his gaming device. Lisa opened her book. And Tom, for the first time in years, didn't immediately start counting down the minutes until landing. Instead, he pulled out his laptop and opened a design file he'd been working on before the trip. If one component could develop stress fractures that quickly, maybe others were vulnerable too. He had ideas for improvements, ideas that might make the difference between a safe flight and a catastrophe. As his fingers moved over the keyboard, Tom felt a strange sense of peace. The fear of flying hadn't vanished. It probably never would. But now he understood something important. Courage wasn't about not being afraid. It was about finding something that mattered more than the fear.